Okay, so today we're talking about female hormones. Why do I feel wildly out of depth and unqualified to talk about this? But it's amazing and fascinating, especially talking to my girlfriend as well, when we've all been discussing about the connection between the gut and things like PMT. And there's genuinely a lot of evidence there now, scientifically backed evidence. So let's go, like all of these clinics that we do, let's go right back to the beginning and just talk about, are we talking about hormones as an overview, or are we talking about specifically PMT?
So PMT is part of the picture really, but it does apply to hormone balance generally, looking at things like levels of estrogen, testosterone, progesterone. It does apply to all of it. So it covers PMT as well as it covers things like endometriosis. So yeah, we can classify it all together.
So if somebody's listening to this, let's just start with, I don't think we need to explain what PMT is really, but what we need to do is firstly go, well, how could that be connected to gut health?
Yeah, so with your hormone balance, there's the levels of your hormones are quite tightly regulated with various processes in your body. But one thing that we do a lot of work on in my clinic is the detoxification of these hormones. So if you can't detoxify things very well, then your levels can either get too high or too low or completely dysregulated. And then that can be responsible for what's then occurring in terms of your symptoms. So if you get to that time of the month and, you feel really angry, you get blood sugar cravings, you're feeling really, really moody or really depressed or tearful, that kind of picture, then that can sometimes be due to estrogen imbalances.
So, but are we saying that, so those feelings aren't necessarily a normal reaction? Not everyone has that.
No. So, it's something that's quite common and most people are familiar with at some point in their lives that then this happens, but it is an imbalance that causes those things to happen. It's just a very vulnerable time, so that it's quite easy for that to happen. But no, it's not normal. And actually, when you've got healthy hormone metabolism, you shouldn't even really notice at all anything like that go on.
So how, what sort of, we talked about the symptoms about, being angry and food cravings. Is there anything else that you should be looking out for?
Sometimes people get migraines, headaches, and then lots and lots of cramping symptoms. Sometimes people get diarrhea. It's quite nasty. In some circumstances, actually, people are sick. People vomit because of what's going on with the hormones. So it can be really severe in some cases.
So when somebody comes to you in your clinic and they've got a lot of these symptoms, where do you start and what can be done that is connected to the gut but is also natural?
Yeah, so there's sort of two avenues really, but in terms of the gut connection, that's the first place to start, because what the gut does, so there's bacteria in the gut that make an enzyme, and this enzyme is called beta glucuronidase. And what this does is it takes estrogens that have been detoxified by the liver, and it says, no, I'm not having that. And it sends them back into the body again instead of excreting them through the bowel. So this particular enzyme that lots of different types of bacteria make, if you get too much of that in your gut, then the work of the liver to detoxify the estrogen is pointless, because then it gets they call it uncoupling, or it gets unconjugated, then it gets completely reabsorbed back in again.
But what would cause that loop cycle? Why wouldn't it be detoxified?
So because you've got too much of the bacteria that make the enzyme, so it comes back to dysbiosis in the gut again. So if the balance is not right, then you get more beta-glucuronidase, and then that means it can work both ways, because it's all about balance in the gut. It's never, if there's just too much of something, get rid of it, or if there's not enough of something, just supplement it. It's just so much more complicated than that. So for people that are postmenopausal, say, that actually have a lower level of estrogen production, sometimes you can actually make that better by looking at their gut bacteria and causing the maximum amount to be retained in the body. And you can do that by just manipulating the microbiome through your diet and things like probiotics. But the other end of the spectrum, where somebody's got, say, endometriosis or really, really heavy periods, and they've got an estrogen excess in their body, then you want to manipulate the microbes so that it clears really effectively and actually excretes it in the stool rather than sends it back through into the body again.
And how do you even begin to do that?
So it's not as hard as it sounds,
Right,
because it
okay.
all sounds really
Sounds super complex,
complicated
yeah.
at the moment. But really what we're trying to do is favour the balance of diversity of bacteria in the gut. So yes, you've got some that produce beta-glucuronidase, which is an important part of its metabolism, but you don't want too much and you don't want too little. And the way to do that, the absolute best way, is to get a variety of different fibres in your diet, sufficient fibres and lots of phytonutrients, lots of colours and plant feeds, because each different pigment and chemical in the plant feeds a very slightly different type of bacteria. So if you're just having lots of variety in your diet and having lots of whole grains and fibres and vegetables and things like lentils and pulses, then it actually favours a really diverse microbiome, and the beta-glucuronidase levels can really settle down.
And on top of that as well, where can, we're talking about diversifying your diet. What about having the wrong foods in your diet? Do you say to people like, okay, start cutting out sugars? Are we talking gluten and dairy? Like what's...
Not so much, actually. Not so much. It doesn't have as direct an impact. So if they were having like gluten for breakfast, lunch and dinner, then you'd say, well, let's get it in a bit more balance, because that's just a little bit
or
too
the
much of
type
any food.
of gluten.
Exactly, yeah. But it's not so much elimination. So sometimes with hormone imbalances, dairy can not be so useful, because in order for cows to produce milk, they've got hormones in order to do that. So, you do get some passing down of the hormones through the diet, and that might not be useful. But there's not really a particular problem with having gluten for people that have got hormone imbalances. But it's just, it's so unique to the individual. It's hard to say what's ideal.
And I imagine if somebody's watching this as well, it's like, oh, well, okay, well, maybe that's me, but I'm not really too sure. I'm assuming when people come to your clinic, you are doing gut testing on them. So you can actually see, oh, look, okay, there really is an overgrowth or an undergrowth, or there's not enough of this.
Yeah, and you can actually measure that particular enzyme as well, the beta-glucuronidase. You can actually get the levels of that.
So the advice would be to people, if you can, find a great nutritionist that specialises in functional medicine near you, and go and see them and be guided through that process. Or if there are people that are watching this and listening, then message us via the Gutology website, and we might be able to find somebody near you. Is a good idea.
Yeah, and the other thing we do in combination with that, because I said there's sort of two-pronged approach that we go for, is we do urine testing to actually look at the metabolites of estrogen. So estrogen, there's different types of it, and as it breaks down, it turns into slightly different versions of itself. And we can measure all of those different types, and we can spot now exactly where the imbalance is. So if a particular type is being overproduced, it might be the type that's more nasty, more likely to cause symptoms. But then there's another type of estrogen that's quite protective. It helps the bones, it helps with the cell's health. So actually understanding exactly what is happening in your body and how you're metabolizing the estrogen can be really, really useful. And then you just put that data together, and then you've got a personalized program for somebody.